I think it was when people you actually knew previously were using the services, or when a friend was dying. They were the hardest parts. There were several occasions when I slept over at Lighthouse when a close friend was dying. That felt strange at first because work and personal life were blending, and I had to force myself to extricate myself from the situation, but it was hard. Working downstairs in the therapy room, knowing that a friend staying on a residential unit could die at any time, was not always easy, but I had to put it to the back of my mind until after the session. Well, for a start, it made me look at royalty and Hollywood in a totally new light. Seriously, it was a deeply humbling experience. When I started at London Lighthouse in 1990, I felt like a fish out of water. The experience was so new, and my training never, I don't think it could have, prepared me for such a work setting. My work was a mix of dealing with anxiety issues around HIV and death itself, pain relief, grief, general issues, and even smoking cessation when a service user was on a health kick. I truly feel privileged to have worked there. Underlying that was the fact that the therapies I and the great team of other therapists I worked with offered could enhance the service user's immune system and sense of well-being, so a lot of focus was on that. It felt uplifting when service users would come in and say their blood T-cell count had leapt, and I feel that even if I contributed to it in some small way, then that for me was a good thing. Sitting by someone's bed with the soft lighting falling on their face and knowing they were probably only a day or so from death could seem so surreal. You can't fail to be affected in some way by that. It moved me deeply to see someone's face as they relaxed, with all their cares and pain gone, if only for an hour. Well, after leaving Lighthouse, there was nothing really that could top that experience. It was so uniquely special and at such a time in history that it can never be repeated. I, like many others, felt tremendous sadness when the residential unit closed. It closed because in the mid-1990s, drug combination therapies for HIV and AIDS were coming into existence, and people weren't dying en masse anymore. As a result, health authorities weren't buying the Lighthouse services as much, and the government also cut its funding to Lighthouse and many other HIV organisations. It was a difficult time for Lighthouse, and tough decisions had to be made by the then Chief Executive Susie Parsons, who had taken over from co-founder Christopher Spence, who had retired from Lighthouse. Sadly, the residential unit had to go, but at least the Lighthouse didn't lose the building completely, as would possibly have been the case, because Kensington and Chelsea Council bought the residential unit floor to convert into flats for vulnerable people. The closing party for the residential unit was on the 12th of August, 1998. As you can imagine, emotions were veering between sadness and anger, and also happiness and celebration at the great work that had gone on there. When the flats were being built to replace the residential unit, and I was going onto the first floor of the building, and then seeing the stairs up to the residential unit blocked off, I don't mind admitting I used to choke up, because it seemed such a waste for such a special place to end up as, well, just flats. There were times early on when, out of habit, I would continue walking up those stairs, only to be met by a cold steel false ceiling, preventing me from going any further. The collective energy of all the residential unit nurses, volunteers and staff had, I felt, dissipated. I feel to this day that had Lighthouse been allowed to transform itself, then it would have made an amazing generic hospice. THT-Lighthouse, Terrence Higgins Trust Lighthouse, as it is now called, is today a very different place from the lighthouse we all knew. Our lighthouse, was absolutely right for its time and met the great demand and need at that point in history, and we were fortunate and privileged to have been able to contribute to that. On the 20th of June 2009, almost 11 years since the residential unit closed and many of us parted company, there was a first reunion which began through the Facebook group for former staff, therapists, volunteers and service users. It was held at the Lighthouse Lancaster Road building, the main building. It was an emotional, happy, uplifting day. It did not seem at all as if over a decade had passed and everyone had aged well. We all felt that sense of unique camaraderie of having shared a powerful time in history. It was like taking a step back in time. It seemed there were permanent smiles etched on the faces of those there. Such was the feeling of being reunited with people one really cared about. The next reunion will be June the 26th, 2010, when people who couldn't make the first one will no doubt come and experience the same feelings. Those reunions will become a feature in our calendar, and it is planned to hold them every 2 years from 2010. Lighthouse is still close to people's hearts. It employed some amazing people with wonderful skills, and Lighthouse truly was a light shining in the darkness for many people who used its services and ended their days there. Those Lighthouse days are never far from my thoughts.